What is going on, guys? Welcome to the Wednesday night live stream. So today we're just going to do a little bit more of a random Q&A one. So if you guys got any questions you want me to answer, be sure to let me know in the chat below. What is going on, Scott, Sam, Carlos, Portwolf, Amy, John? $10 super chat right off the bat. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. That is awesome. Thank you. Let's get this party started. Thank you. I really appreciate that, John. Scott, so actually we'll dig into your question first. So Scott was asking about Kalkwasser. So you basically want to know how he would start dosing Kalk. Daily evaporations, 9.5 liters. Running calcium reactor, have got a Versa pump, which you want to use for the Kalk. So basically to test it out, because we were chatting a little bit before the stream started. And with that, if you just want to test the drip it, like you could use the Versa, but honestly, it will noticeably increase your pH. It does make a decent difference. Now, if you're not using a Kalkwasser reactor, you're going to be dripping it into the tank, and so you're going to have to pre-mix it. Now, the most that will saturate, it's either 1 teaspoon or 1 tablespoon. I never remember which one it is, but one of the two per gallon of water. So if you got 9.5 liters, that's 2-ish gallons. So that would be your max. So you can't drip more than that, or else you're going to be raising the water level in your tank. Now, with using the Versa, I mean, the nice thing about that is you can set it to a very consistent drip, right? So if you set it to your 1 mil per minute times however minutes in a day, and kind of go from there. Now on mine, because I'm using the ice cap kelp stir, and every 4 hours I have it mix. So the difference is I have it pushing water, so I have a Versa that sucks from my ATO and pushes water through the Kalk reactor, and doing it that way, it makes sure it's, as you're taking your saturated solution out, it's always being replaced with fresh RODI water, and that way it's always fully saturated. Now the biggest advantage to that is that you can basically ignore it for months and months and months, and then eventually you can just top it off. Sorry, not months, like once a month roughly I'll maintain and do it. Or if you're mixing it manually, maybe every day or two you got to do a new batch. So it's a lot less work that way. Roofing with though, happy new year. Sorry I'm late. Welcome, buddy, and thank you for the $2.99 super chat. Much appreciated. What's going on? Roy, Hernando, Battle of CR, Tracy, welcome, guys. So 100% can drip Kalk, good proof of concept. The only one side with it is eventually it becomes a lot of effort to mix up that batch every day or two. That's where the Kalkwasser reactor would be your friend. Now, you also mentioned that you're running a calcium reactor. So I know you're mainly doing it for pH purposes, but if you're using a calcium reactor, the Kalkwasser is also going to increase your calcium alkalinity as you're dripping it. So you're going to have to lower your effluent rate from the calcium reactor. So you're going to have to play with that balance to get it nicer, to get it properly. Now, on my frag tank, so far, I've only used Kalkwasser. I have my calcium reactor sitting there, and I have yet to fire it up because the Kalkwasser is handling everything, and that's at 1 mil per minute at fully saturated. So it can go quite a long way, so keep that in mind. If you had any more specific questions on that one, let me know below. How's it going, Roy? Welcome. Okay, so Sydney was asking for some more info about the calcium reactor. How's the pH been? So with that, so with the calcium reactor, so I do run the calcium reactor as my main supplementation on the water box tank, and that has been working quite well. That is 100% handled all on my demands plus some, so tons of room to grow. So lately I've been on my battle to raise pH. So with that, I added the second chamber to the calcium reactor. You know, I have my refugium running 24/7 now. I have my outside air line running from my attic. You know, I have my massive CO2 scrubber that's up there doing it. So all these things have added up. So it's over all these accumulated, it's been a nice big boost in pH. Now, I've also been playing with potassium hydroxide, which is one we talked about, Chris, with a few weeks ago, which is extremely potent. Now that will also add elk. So it's like this big balancing act trying to get everything happy, and I'm almost there, almost getting there. So it's definitely some potent, nasty stuff. So with caution, if anyone tries that route, but so the pH battle is there. It's getting closer. You know, 2 months ago, my pH was extremely low, and now it is much better. So now I think, what's my current pH? 8.22, which for me is good because before it was never even under 8. So I've done all these different steps to get it up there, and it's slowly getting there. John, I've been crazy looking for Versa pumps. Yeah, they're a little bit sparse. I know Ecotech, there was less production, obviously, because state of the world. And I know they're also moving buildings and a bunch of other stuff, so there probably is a bit of limited stock until everything's moved in there. Still bubbling for pH. I am not. However, if you were doing that with outside air, it would probably have some benefit to it. Will you keep your elk at? I generally try and keep my elk around 8.5. So right now it shot up a little bit. It's about 8.8, but 8.5 is kind of my target. I just like it right in the middle. I find it keeps most things pretty happy. So the pH has been really good. What's the G tank? This one is 8.09, the one that I'm dripping kelp to. That kind of gives you the comparison. So Kalkwasser really does amazing stuff for pH. Sydney, how are you going to add more LED strips? Yeah, so if you guys watched Monday's video, I added the LED strip on the top of my light bar, which is like super subtle because you don't know it's there until alarm comes on. It lights up the roof red, which I think is really cool. Cool way to do it because it's stealthy. Like I like stuff to be sleek and stealthy all the time. Another thing I was thinking, someone else mentioned in the chat, but about adding fans, which I mean 24-volt fans powered directly off the port. It's a good way for doing your own, like you don't need a chiller, but you need some cooling in the summer. That might be probably another future project to add there. Most thinking I might add some, like a big LED strip inside. I'll get a white one next and do that in the stand so it lights it up. Brian, I'm using a calc reactor and have it balanced to keep alkalinity stable at 10, calcium mag proper, my pH is at 8. How can I raise my pH without raising my elk? Already using a CO2 scrubber. So it's a bit of a tricky one. The other consideration is if you have something like a CO2 meter, like one of these guys, you can see what the CO2 is in your house, and or just open a window. And if your pH still goes up a lot higher, then opening a window more is obviously going to help. Or if you want to go up to that next level, something like an air exchanger can make a big difference to reduce the CO2 from the tank. So the main reason we have low CO2 is because there's higher CO2 in your room around your tank, and with surface agitation, everything, you're doing that air exchanges and it'll equalize with the room. So if there's lots of people in there or your house is newer, really sealed up, then your tank doesn't get as much fresh air because it's equalizing with that room CO2. So any of those can kind of work to help do it. It is a little bit of a battle. I mean, you could run refugium. On mine I have it set fairly high and running 24/7. Like there's all these little steps that you can do and they all add up. So Ghoul's first live stream. Hello from Vernon. You're local. Welcome from Kelowna. Battle CR keeping elk at 9.5. I've had elk at 10. I've had it at 6.5. I had it at 8. Like anywhere your tank can thrive, it's just key is keeping it stable, right? Pick a spot and stay there. Roy, I'm struggling with high pH. Lucky guy. I'm trying to figure out the correct ratio of soda ash to sodium bicarbonate. Struggling to keep it all steady as there's no calculator says how much. Yeah, you kind of just have to play with the blend. I never remember which one's which, but one of them has a much higher boost of it. But if you're struggling with high pH, use whatever one of the two has less of an impact on pH. That's the simplest way to do it for you. Maybe don't do your blend, just pick the other one. Do you have any tips on keeping Dragon's Breath macro? I have had it. I've done nothing special for it. It just seemed to do its thing. I think one of my fish ate it, so that's what kind of killed it all at the end of the day. Do you think that will bridge the gap between the bare bottom and sand bottom? What was that one, John? Oh, reborn at the bottom of the tank. You know what? You 100% could use calcium reactor media as your substrate. Like it's just like big rocks, right? It's calcium carbonate. And it 100% would work. The only downfall I would say is it's more likely to trap detritus and different things because under those little nooks and crannies of the big particles, but it'd probably buffer your parameters and keeps things pretty stable. 48 by 18 by 20 tall, 1 SPS dominant, Radion or AI. Honestly, either one will work. They're both nice lights. Ecotech, AI, they're the same like mother kind of company. They're both really well made. I've used the AIs like the Refugium light, and I've used the Prime HD and the Prime. I haven't used like the Souls and the Hydras, but I know lots of people that do and they love them. So I have Radions on mine, but honestly, either one you'll be happy with. Malcolm's Reef. Devin, how do I lower my alkalinity? Runs anywhere between 10.5 and 11.5. So the question is, how are you supplementing your magnesium or your alkalinity now, Malcolm? Higher alkalinity tends to lead to higher pH. You are correct. Keep mine at 9.5, which keeps my pH above 8. Yep. Yeah, okay, so the meter says around 800 ppm inside. So that is a little bit higher. Mine's probably similar to yours. Outside air is about 400, so you got about double the CO2 in your house as you do outside. So if it was possible to get an outside air line to your skimmer, like that alone can help make a big difference. Anish. What was your comment? Sadly, I have aptasia. Will a peppermint shrimp do the job? Is it reef safe? Somewhat. So in general, peppermint shrimp are reef safe. There is ones that look very similar that are called camel shrimp. Those are not reef safe, so make sure you actually have proper peppermint shrimp and not those. Peppermint shrimp can be opportunistic. There is a bit of a risk of them snacking on LPS, so keep that in mind. A lot of these creatures, if well fed, are fine, but if they go hungry, they can potentially munch on something. Okay, K is salty. So 215s are 30 for that 75 SPS. Let me scroll with the dimensions. 48 by 18 by 20. I would do 215s over a single 30, and then you can spread them out a little bit better. Pappy, is iron critical for macroalgae growth? So what's going on, Telegram? Okay, so eventually, if you run out of iron in your tank, your chaeto or your macroalgae will become stunted. So I've seen before where actually back in the day when I was using my chaeto reactor, it grew like crazy, you know, for months and months and months, and then all of a sudden, boom, it just stopped. Like it just felt like it just lost its momentum, and then found out it's because I was out of iron and molybdenum, I think it was. And then when I started dosing them, it started growing like crazy again. So I know like Pax Bellum and some of those companies actually sell or give you a supplement that has those in it with their reactors. So like they figured that a long time ago that these are required. So you don't want to overdose it. If you overdose iron, it tends to change some of the colors of your corals, like your yellows will turn more greens and different things. That's kind of how you know if you're overdosing iron, or you just test for it. But you definitely can overdose iron. So, but yeah, if you get too low in it, it will stunt your chaeto growth. So it really depends. You might get enough from water changes, you might not. So one of those things is good to test once in a while. Do you think Apex Sun will be any good? Speculation. By the sun, you mean the... I'm blanking on the name of it, but I know what you're talking about. It's hard to say. I envision it being like a coral, like the Coral Care version that's slightly tweaked. So we'll find out on that one. It's really as hard to say until you actually see it and see what it does, see what the spread is and all that jazz, the spectrum. Malcolm's Reef, 499 super chat. Thank you, sir. Much appreciated. The sky. Thank you, Russell. Yeah, so the Neptune sky. Like, honestly, I'm sure it's going to be a decent light, right? Would I pick it over other lights? Who knows, right? I'm sure it will be decent, though. Thank you for all you do for us. Thank you, K-Slay. Appreciate it. Okay. Palm tree. My elegance is unhealthy. Hasn't opened up in a few days. Aquaculture frag. When I got it, it was very healthy. My torch is near it. Not too close. Is very healthy. So elegance, one, make sure it's actually getting food. Two, make sure you're not killing it with flow. They don't want to flow. So LPS, they have very sharp skeletons, some of them, and if it's too much flow, they could actually be cutting themselves from the flesh rubbing against their sharp skeletons. So if it could just be the light and flow you have it in is happy, I mean, I'd probably just try to move it to a different spot of the tank and see how it does. What do we get? Okay, so that's just Scott's. Kevin, tank maintenance, what and when? I just did a 6 months cleaning on the return pump. Clarity and sump yesterday. The importance of staying on top of what we do. This is very true. And usually, if your gear gets caked on with stuff, if it's running, it's usually going to keep running. But if for some reason you turn it off, it can have a harder time restarting, like after a power outage or something else like that. So in general, I like to clean stuff probably like return pump. I'm going to say ideally like once a year, but in general, I'd say like every 6 months or so would be a good way to do it. Yeah, I know. Once every 6 months, I'm gonna say it's worth giving everything a good clean, or at least once a year at the minimum. But like skimmer pump, return pump, all that. Power heads, they're probably every 4 to 6 months. Basically, when they start to get algae or stuff caked on them, I'll pop them out and just throw them in citric acid for a bit and give them a clean. Bert, I have 2 acropore colonies in my tank. Without testing anything, they double in size in 2 months. Awesome. Tested elk, it was 5.9. Never dosed. No. But I do now, crazy. Yeah, so that's the thing. It can drift over time, especially if you're not doing water changes. Or if you're doing water changes and not big enough, it can definitely shift after a little while. So that is something you want to consider. That is definitely on the low side. I think I've had it down to 6.8, I think, before. So 5.9 is definitely lower than I've had it. But the tank was still thriving, right? So the thing is, it's probably been stable there for a while. But you do, even if you keep it at 7.5, on the lower end is fine, but don't let it go too crazy low or the corals will get stressed eventually. Pop Daddy Reef. Thanks for $5 super chat. Thank you, sir. ICP showed 0 iron. All other elements are good. Any recommended supplement? Yes. I'll show you what I'm dosing. Alright, so I am currently using this one's probably going to be transparent because it's my green screen background, but it is Chaeto Grow from Brightwell, and this is iron, cobalt, and molybdenum. This works very well, and I have this actually on a doser now, so doses like 1 mil or 2 a day just to keep my levels up. So this stuff's pretty inexpensive and it works well. So definitely Chaeto Grow. It will help kickstart your refugium. It should definitely help. Battle CR Elegance is 12-inch my tanks and takes up the middle of my tank. Yeah, Elegance are pretty when they're huge and big and open. Battle OCR, you feed your Elegance food every night. Yeah, you're much better than most people, I think. I probably do mine spot feed the entire tank daily, so kind of gets fed that way. I don't know, randomly I'll spot feed, target feed, maybe once a week or so. But for the most part, I just put a frozen chunk of mysis on the power head and let it fire it all over the tank and feed stuff randomly. Paul, upgrading tanks. Any tips specifically on moving corals? If possible, if you're moving corals. Now, corals are less finicky than fish. I have had corals living in a bucket of new salt water for like a month, right? As long as your elk and your main parameters are stable, you have some flow, heater, all the general stuff, you're good. So that definitely does work. Now, the biggest thing is if you're moving fish over and your tank isn't cycled or you're getting big spikes, that could be an issue. I mean, if it's 1 or 2 little fish in a big tank, not really an issue. But if you have a ton of fish, it might overwhelm the bacteria load. So it's a good idea to take more care that way. But honestly, I find most of the time corals are more hardier than fish. You just got to keep your main parameters stable. Brock B, have you considered the Moonshiner method for its major and minor? I have considered it. I've actually joined the group a while ago, and I've been researching it. I may try it one of these days. Currently, what I'm doing is I have a bunch kind of like the bulk elements, like the Replenish and the Brightwell Trace one. I think it's the Replenish, yeah. So what I've actually did, I was manually dosing it and at my slacker method of whenever I remember to do it. So more recently, I added onto the doser, and I'm gonna basically waiting maybe another week or two, and I'm gonna send another ICP test and see where it is, because I'm a little bit curious to see if the levels are going up or down, or maybe one's really low, one's really high, because when you're doing the blend of trace elements, it's not as quite as precise. It's easier, right? Because you're dosing one thing instead of 10. But so I don't know. We'll see. I'm gonna wait and see how the current method is working, and then we'll see what happens. Jared, what light is your torch curls up top? What's the lowest or highest they can handle? Torches can handle a pretty big range. I find some of them, they'll get better coloration, higher par. I mean, some of them lower par. I always find it interesting too if you take a coral and you put one higher, one lower, and you see how they adapt or how they change over time. It's kind of interesting, so it depends. I'm gonna guess they're probably around 180 to 250 there, depends. So on my light schedule, I have basically a modified version of the AB plus throughout the whole day. And then for 4 hours of the day, I have it cranked up. So it's an extra 15 or 20% higher for those 4 hours. It's kind of like my high noon, high par, give the corals lots of juice. So it depends on what part of the day, but I should par test my tank. It's been a while. Maybe I'll do that soon. but I believe I'm gonna say 180 to 250 range is where mine are. Devin, what do you dose to keep your elk stable? Must dose a lot per day. I have a calcium reactor, so I have a Versa feeding the calcium reactor, so it's dosing 24 hours a day, and it keeps things pretty stable. In general, like, yeah, so just from like 8.49, 8 hours later 8.59, 8 hours later 8.58, 8 hours later 8.49. So in general, it's pretty stable. Like I'm gonna say 0.1 swing over 8 to 12 hours and kind of bounces back and forth. But I've got it pretty stable. I've been experimenting with mixing a few different things, so that's messed with my stability a little bit. So I've been trying to dial that back in with dosing multiple things that affect elk, which is the trickier part. Scott, do you know if Neptune is going to bring out an EP832 for the UK? Who knows? I see that question asked all the time, and I know one day it will probably happen. However, I know that people have been asking for that for years, so that's a good question. Running Geo's calcium, dealing with low CO2, wanting to dose rather calc or pH booster, and recommendations on the Boost Plus. So the Boost Plus is from Brightwell, and I believe they are working on a new formula for that in the near future. So I'm probably going to try it out actually on my frag tank and then kind of see how that does. So I can't tell you yet because I don't have it yet, but once I do, I will definitely use it for a month or so and let you guys know how that goes. But I'm definitely curious. If it works well, that'll be awesome. Moonshiner is popular here in Houston with Andre. Be doing it the next month. I've actually been trying to lure Andre onto a live stream. I think it'd be a good chat with him. So, what's going on? Keyball's Reef. May need to get a calcium reactor going. Just need to doser and a regulator. Okay. With a calcium reactor, number one, I would try get a peristaltic pump for like a continuous DOD pump. I think that's most important. I have the carbon doser, which I bought off Derek a while ago, which has been awesome because it's super duper stable. But if you only get like one fancy calcium reactor thing, I would get a continuous duty pump because having that consistent flow will make it way easier to dial stuff in. Eric, Devin, what salt do you use these days? I have been using the Brightwell. I have used probably most salts. Majority of the time, it's just been whatever is on sale. More recently, I have been using Brightwell for the last little while. They are a channel sponsor, so that does help a little bit. But it's random, you know. I've used Aquaforest, I've used Brightwell, I've used Fritz, I've used Instant Ocean, Reef Crystals, you know, the red, what is it, not red, blue and black from Red Sea. Like, I've tried most salts, and one of the biggest things is if you're mixing a bucket, doing a water change, pick whatever salt matches your alkalinity. One of the main reasons I've been more heavy on the Brightwell lately is one, that I like the parameter range of it, but the other part of it is it mixes and it keeps nicely. So my mixing bins aren't all nasty. Like when I use like Reef Crystal stuff before, they get all brown and nasty after a while when I haven't had that with the Neomarine. So that's one of the big selling points for me there. Will you be selling your frags in the frag tank? I probably will eventually. I've traded with some local people with it. One of the main things is just I want stuff to grow out. Like if I sell them all, then I'll have nothing to grow out because none of them are huge yet, right? I want like big cool colonies. So eventually I think that I probably will do something. Alex, Reef Moonshine is awesome. You know, I might do a hybrid one of it. I don't know if I will fully do it. I'll probably do my automated dose of my blends, and I may get some of the individual elements to correct if anything's out of whack. So we'll see. I may do my own little hybrid method, but that'll be a little bit until I get the ICP tests in. I have a nice package of shiny ICP tests. I bought 2 of them on Boxing Day sales or Black Friday, whatever the heck it was, and waiting for a little more time. I'm trying to wait a good month of all the auto dosing before I test, just to see if anything's out of whack or high or low. All right, Ouija. Sorry if this has been asked. I have started dosing Aquaforest, calcium through the day and alkalinity through the night. You can 100% do that. It does help combat the swing at nighttime through pH, but on the flip side, your elk is consumed mainly in the day when the lights are on. So I personally just dose it 24 hours a day. Like when I was doing it through the dose, I had it dosing every 15 minutes, and then with the Versa ones, like my dosing, I have it just continuous, and I just have it set however many mils a minute and go super slow. What micron sock do you recommend when siphoning out dinos out of the sand? Probably 5 micron, I'm gonna say is good. You can probably go higher. I don't know for sure on that one. When I did mine sand, I had a 50 on there, but that wasn't specifically for dinos. I would probably just use a standard sediment filter though, like 5 or 10 is probably fine. But you'd have to Google which one for sure. Yeah, David, I've talked to Andre, and he has a bunch of projects on the go, moving and setting up an office and all this jazz. So once all that's done, then I'll lure him on in the future. Once the schedule opens back up. Neomarine. Yep, it is Neomarine. Palm tree. Black color zoas with bright yellow center. I don't think I've ever seen those, so I'm going to guess they probably are. Eric, are you using a dose auto water change? I am doing it with a Versa. So I have one Versa up at my tank that's pumping tank water to the drain, which is down with my laundry. And I have a second Versa at my saltwater mixing bin down there that pumps fresh salt water up to the tank. So I have it currently doing about 10,000 mils a day. So a little of about 2.5 gallons a day. Port Wolf trying to talk you into a farm one day. Baby steps, maybe one day. So David, setting up an auto water change with a Neptune dose because the noise is going to do the water change at night. Is it better to do a little throughout the day? The dose does work well, but it is loud. That is my main complaint with it. I had one which I was going to use for auto water change. I got the Versa and so quiet there, and that's why I swapped to those. I mean, if you can do it in the middle of the night and you're sleeping, it's not going to wake you up. That's a good way to go. I do mine over 2 hours. I believe I do it over. So Jason Max at 5 micron. Okay, perfect. So 5 micron for siphoning dinos through a filter. Do you run a calcium reactor even at night? Yes, I do. It's 24/7, always going. I have it set currently because of the stuff I've been dosing also affects elk. So if my elk goes over 8.7 or 8.8, then I turn off until it drops back down. I did that just to keep it from running out, but it basically runs 24/7. Battles here at 25 gallons with my dose has been awesome. Nice. I kind of like it. The noise lets you know it's working. There you go. I mean, it depends, right? If you're not somewhere where the noise matters, then who cares? Perfect. Or if a lot of people do have it in their garage, and if you do, it's a perfect way to do it. Battle of CR switching to the PMUMP because using the ATK bracket for water changes instead. You know, if you have the 2 PMUMPs would be another super simple way to do it, right? Instead of using a dose. And you could do it rather quickly. Just have one in your tank with a siphon break, and you could have one at your mixing burns again, siphon break on both sides, and you could use optical sensors, right? So you could take out, you know, say you have a high and a low, you know, take out water until your bottom optical sensor triggers, and then when that's done, turn on the next pump to refill your salt water until the high level one's triggered, right? Just make sure you turn off your ATO when you do it, and it'd be a super easy way to do it. I actually debated doing it that way before I got the Versas. When I got the Versas, I decided to go that way instead. Casely, how prevalent would you say doctoring of photos of coral sales are between distributors and brands? I don't think a ton do it, but it definitely does happen. I have been burned by that in the past. In my early days of the hobby, I've ordered something and you're like, this looks nothing like the photo. And that was a bugger because I spent like $100 on some Zoas, and then it's like, well, this is crap. I don't think most of the reputable ones do it. Usually just read reviews on whoever you're buying from, and if they're, you know, if they've been shoddily doing it, then you can kind of tell. The biggest thing is, like, if you're looking at a photo, look, you know, usually they're on a frag rack, right? Does the frag rack look white? You know, does it look green or some weird color? If they are, they're shifting the saturation or the hue of the photo. Or, you know, look at a frag prog, like look at stuff that you know what color it should be and use that to gauge how far to whack the color is. Like, usually when I post photos, like, I try and make it as true to eye that I can see it. Like, if I do play with the color a little bit, it's try and color collect it to make it more accurate. So I don't really like it when they're super overly saturated because it just looks fake and you can usually tell. So I kind of got to use your judgment on that one. But if it's somewhere you haven't ordered from again, just check out reviews from other people on them and kind of gauge it. Okay, Jamie, how do you regulate calcium reactor dripping? Never had one. Okay, so with the calcium reactor, you can either use like a ball or a needle or a pinch valve and something to restrict it. So when I first had a calcium reactor way back when, I had it running off a manifold and I used like a needle valve on the output. Now, the only downfall of this is it could muck up over time and it's not as consistent because your flow could change your pump and all that jazz. Ideally, if you got the cash for it, I would get a parastolic continuous duty pump, because you know you're 100% stable and consistent, and it just makes it so much easier to tune it and dial it in. Producer Reef, what's going on? Scotty, what's going on, guys? Lad Blank, welcome. Okay, what do we got? So Eric, yeah, 24-volt fans. I think that is something I may do in the summer. Just add a couple like 120 or 240 mil fans and hook it up to the 24-volt on the apex. Do it, maybe vent through the stand or blow down the water. I think that'd be a cool way to do it. So super duper easy. So I think I may partake in that one. You don't lose any extra outlets, which is sweet. All right, Dennis, you're asked about dosing calc. We did talk about that one earlier. You can pre-mix it, you can drip it, you can put your auto top off, which is probably the easiest one. The only downfall is you need to maintain that pump a little more often because calc is hard on stuff. If you're using a calc reactor, usually I like to put the pump before the reactor. That way it's not touching any of the saturated solution. It's only touching the RODI water. Then you don't have any extra maintenance on it. Okay, so Cody, difference in CO2 scrubbers. Why should I buy one, like an ice cap one, versus a cheap RODI canister style? You can use absolutely anything you want for a CO2 scrubber. If you don't care what it looks like, you can use a pop bottle for all you want, right? The difference in more of a purpose-built one, potentially, not 100% saying, is it could have a more even airflow. A lot of this has to do with the media using the side of it, but if, say, you have like media where like the air can run like an angle and it doesn't go through all the media, then you're not going to fully saturate and fully use it. So that is a potential of doing air channels, but I mean, that could happen with anything. I think it comes more down to your media, and half of it's just looks. You know, if you're, you know, have some fancy display sump, maybe you want pristine acrylic containers and you want to look at, right? If you have, you know, whatever stand, you know, got your plywood stand that you've hammered together and mishmash whatever in there, then you probably don't care, right? Like, you can go get a pop bottle, go to Walmart and get a big jar. Like, you can use whatever you want, right? It's just, as long as the air is forced to flow through it, top to bottom, it's gonna work. Now, if you're using in your house, another tip that you can do is you have a little bit of water in the bottom, and that little bit of moisture helps make the media more efficient. So one way of looking at it. So you can 100% DIY one. Like, I was gonna get one. I was actually gonna buy those, like, I think they're those big blue, like super thick tall canisters, but it's like $100 for the canister. So I was like, I got all this clear pipe left over from when I did some Phyto towers. So I was like, perfect. So I just built my own. Deep Reef, have you considered phosphate increase just due to running calcium reactor and media consumption to 2-part? I do not know. I know you can get phosphate out of calcium reactor media. How much is hard to say. I have a very high fish load in my tank, so I have high nutrients regardless. So that's always a little bit of a struggle, is dealing with that, which is why I have like the refugium, you know, and the filter roller and the skimmer and auto water change and all that jazz. Like, I have like 5-6 tanks in there. Like, I have a ton of fish, so I got a lot of waste in mine. So I'm sure it does contribute to it, but it just blends in with all the food and fish and everything else in my tank. This one, I don't know about this one. Okay, so Rendrick was asking aminos effects on elk. How amino acids affects alkalinity? Turned off my 2-part 3 days ago, only dosing aquapower 1 mil per hour, reef energy plus 20 mils once a day, and 7 mils of Brightwell. That's a lot of aminos. Once daily, and my elk is still rising without dosing any 2-part. Now that could also mean stuff just isn't consuming it. I don't know. I don't believe aminos increase elk though, and that's just something else that's adding to your tank. So that one's a little bit of a mystery to me. I use a vast marine media reactor for my CO2. It's been offline. Oh, holds 7 pounds. Good chunk of media. 3-liter pop bottle. I didn't know that was a thing. Was asking about how many drops of liquid of calcium reactor you should be dripping into your tank. Mine previously was doing 40 to 50 milliliters per minute. So that's how much I was doing it. I'm dosing some other stuff now that also raises elk, so I've toned it down. So I'm dosing about half of that, so about 20 mils per minute now, just to level it out so my elk doesn't get too high with the other stuff that I'm dosing. The biggest thing is, like, it's There is calculators you can do to figure it out, like a rough starting point, but at the end of the day, you could use one of those calculators and try and guess, but it depends on how saturated your effluent is, right? So if you need to look at what the pH is inside of your reactor, the lower the pH is inside of your calcium reactor, the more potent it's going to be. Also, if you're dosing more flow, it's going to raise up your ELK more, right? So I would kind of just take a guess, start a bit lower, dose it, test 24 hours later, and see where your ELK is, right? If your ELK is, you know, still dropping or it's not raising much, increase your influent flow rate. If your ELK is, you know, skyrocketing, okay, you got to turn that down, right? So I honestly just do a little bit of test it, wait 24 hours, test again, and then just move up or down. Like even for like dosing pumps, if you're like, oh, this needs to be calibrated, like I don't necessarily even care what the number is, what I'm dosing. It's like, just check your levels, your ELK, you know, is my ELK raising? Okay, change the dose. If it's lowering, okay, add more. If it's the same, your dose is good. So at the end of the day, is it stable? Like that's the main thing is to consider. Is there something wrong with your sailfin's eye? Yes, the Red Sea sailfin, it does have, I think it has pop eye one eye. One eye is fine, the other eye has a little bit of ring. I actually talked to Humble Fish about it, and he says there's not too much you can do about it. He says just it will hopefully heal up over time with good water, so yeah. I'm not quite sure with that, if there's anything else I can do for him, but that was basically just said to keep good water and nutrition, and hopefully over time it goes away on its own. That fish is actually about 10 or 11 years old. It might be actually, yeah, 10, 11 years old now, so I got that off another reefer a while back. What stuff are you dosing? I am dosing some nasty stuff. It is potassium hydroxide, and that is for pH purposes, but it is very nasty, and I'm still experimenting, so I'm not really sharing the special blends of that quite yet until I fully understand it and fully know what's the happy safe levels of everything. So I'm dosing a very, very low dose of it, but it also increases your alkalinity, which makes things a bit tricky with the calcium reactor and stuff. So I've been trying to find that like sweet spot of balance with it all. Lee, cleanup crew, which are helpful, which to avoid? Snails are always good. Conch snails are actually one that's underlooked. Orange lip fighting conch, I find those guys are pretty awesome. They do a wicked job of cleaning the sand bread. They look like little aliens with little googly eyes coming out and big little snouts on it. Snails, I do a big random mix of snails. Like I have a turbo snail, a mastria, I have trochus. Basically just do a big mix of them. Each one does different things. There is little crabs and little different creatures like that. I've stopped adding hermit crabs. I got a few cool ones like the orange and the reds. The blue ones I kind of think they're jerks and they just eat my snails, so I've kind of stopped adding them. But I like some like the Halloween or some of the ones with cool different colors. Telegram, excited to hear your results on dosing. Yeah, I think it will be good. It is like nasty stuff. Like it's all like Walter White style mixing this stuff, like gloves on, respirator, glasses on, like super duper safety, because this stuff is very potent, nasty stuff. It's caustic, you know, you don't want to breathe it in. So it's strong stuff. And I'm only using it at, you know, like a quarter, a fifth of like concentration. It's still strong stuff. So that's why I'm just proceeding cautiously, you know, learning it fully before I share too much on that one. So eventually we'll share it all once I've got it dialed in and know, you know, for sure this is what this much does and get kind of good idea of it. Palm Tree, what's your opinion on Alpha Reef by Tropic Marin? Just started dosing on a 25-gallon mixed reef. Also, conch is pronounced conch. Ah, there you go. I have probably butchered pronunciation on many things, so I apologize for that, but it is what it is. Okay, so Alpha Reef, pretty cool product. Calcium formate. It basically doses everything at once. On a massive tank, it's probably not as economical. I think it's like an awesome solution for a nano tank because you have one dosing head. Here's everything. So you have Alpha Reef. Polyplab makes one called Polyplab 1, which is a similar thing. But for like a nano, I think that's an awesome way to do it, right? You got one bottle, one thing to draw. Perfect. So it makes it easy. What's going on, Michael? Wolfgang, I'm going through the process of drawing up the plumbing for the first time. What are the most common return size holes for a weir, Otterbox, Red Sea? When I plumb a tank, anything from like 60 gallon and up, like that's crazy. I tend to do 1-inch drains and usually 3/4 return. I would almost consider doing like 1-inch returns depending on your pump. but 3/4 to 1 inch returns and 1 inch drains. If you're making a custom tank, do 3 drains for the bean animal style. I find that one works the best, mainly because it has a bit of extra safety. So basically you have a ball valve on your main drain. That's your full siphon that tunes it. You have a second drain that's a bit higher up, and that's going to set your water level, and you want your water to just trickle over it. And then I like to have that extra third drain is just like an emergency drain. So I always do that on custom tanks. The water box just has the 2, so it's, what do you call that? Not bean animal, Herbie, I think it's called. Macy's daddy, do you put cleanup crew in your refugium? Not intentionally, but I did find a snail in there, so he snuck in there somehow. So one does live in my refugium in the water box. I don't think any have snuck into the frag tank one yet. Turkey, keep an eye on potassium. Keep an eye on potassium. We'll do that. I actually did. My potassium, I think it was 420 or 430 when I was doing it. It definitely goes up. So I'm trying to find like that, like kind of like what I do with ozone, like find just enough to kind of keep things happy. Same thing I'm trying with potassium hydroxide, because too much will like shoot up your alkalinity. Like my elk went like crazy high when I first started using it. I had to dial it way back, and then I was having issues where my elk would go too high because I got the calcium reactor and that going, and they're both adding elk to the tank, so it's a bit trickier. So I keep lowering it. So I'm doing a very small, consistent, extremely slow drip of it right now. Eric, how often do you change your RO membrane? When it needs it? Probably, honestly, I probably get a couple of years out of it. I did change it maybe 2 months ago, and then before that was probably like 1.5 to 2.5 years ago. Ideally, way to know is have a TDS meter on your RODI unit. Most membranes are rated from kind of 97 to 98% rejection rate, which means if you test your source water and you got 100 and your output water, it's 1 or 2, you're good, right? But if it's, 5 TDS coming out, then okay, it's only operating at 95% efficiency, it's less than it's rated for, start to consider replacing it. It will still work, but the less efficient it comes, the quicker you're going to burn through your DI resin because it's having to pick up that extra slack. So I'm a fan of, having the multiple TDS units, like the inline ones. So they're always there. You just click the button for the 20-30 bucks. It's worth just adding them in. I have 2 on my one downstairs. So I can monitor the source water, the product water, and then after DI1, then after DI2. So I got 2 DIs on the main one. The secondary unit I have on the frag tank, I have 3 TS meters because there's only 1 DI on it. The other good thing to have, if you do, is add a pressure gauge so that you can tell when to replace your pre-filters. Now with the pre-filters, generally, like if your PSI is 60 normally and you see it drop down to like 50 or something, then you're like, okay, this is starting to, my filters are clogging up, it's time to replace it. And then generally when doing those, I'll replace every second sediment filter. I just put in a new carbon filter. That's kind of been my strategy. See, question first. 1 million frag tank. Okay, yeah. So Scott, you're asking. Just saw your answer to my question. The first thing you say, you're dosing 1 mil per minute on your frag tank consistently over 24 hours. Yep, that is 24 hours a day. So for the Kalkwasser reactor on the frag tank, I'm just gonna double check it right now. So tell you exactly what I got going on. So I had 1.1 mils per minute is what I'm currently dosing on it, and then roughly once a month or so, I'll dump out the calc reactor and then just give it a spray out, clean it, make it look nice, and add in like another cup or so of fresh stuff, refill it RODI, and I'm back in business, and I can ignore it for another month. Ricky Reefer, good to catch you. Good to catch you on live stream, buddy. It's been a little while. Okay, so Palm Tree, how often should I change GFO? How often should I change carbon? I haven't changed either in a little over a month. I changed mine. Okay, the correct answer is you should test your phosphates, and when they're rising, you should change it. I change mine probably every 4 to 6 weeks, roughly, is when I change mine. Carbon is probably likely exhausted much further than that, or much sooner than that, rather, so it's probably only lasts, a week or 2, and it's all used up. I don't like to overdo carbon, but I do like to run it once in a while because I have a mixed reef tank. Obviously helps with water clarity, but I have UV doing that. But Mixed reef, if you have leather corals and those types like mushrooms or certain ones, they can release a toxin into the water, which can stunt growth of acropores and other corals. So kind of one of their chemical warfare methods is releasing some kinds of toxin in the world, and running carbon in your tank will help suck out and remove those toxins. So it prevents any stunting of growth in kind of a mixed reef tank. So yeah, that's my main reason for doing it. I mean, there's other benefits too, right? You know, if you got yellowing in your water organics, you'll suck that out in a bunch of different ways. So it's a few different things. So, but yeah, personally, if your water's starting to look yellow, that could be a good indication. If you walk up to your tank and, you know, it smells oceany or fishy, you're like, okay, maybe it's time to change my carbon. So there's a few different ways you can kind of look at it, but every 4 to 6 weeks is when I roughly change mine. Good to tune in. Welcome, Jordan. How many tanks can I keep in a 4-foot peninsula, and how long before they're moved out? So the big thing with tangs, 1 is territory, 2 is swimming space. They are very, very active fish. Ideally, if, you know, I got a baby in there, it's not a big deal, right? But, you know, if they're getting 6-8 inches, 4 feet's probably getting a little cramped for them. At which point I would want to consider trading them to, you know, your store, or use it as an excuse to upgrade your tank. So it kind of looks that way. Welcome, Jay Lee. That's been a little while. Depending on the type. Yeah, exactly. Like if you get something like a bristletooth or a whitetail, like those tanks stay much smaller, and that would probably be fine in there for ages, right? But a hippo tang, that can get a foot or larger, right? And that would be, you know, he moves a third of his body over and he's already in the tank. Like they get too big. So you just stick to the smaller tanks unless you're planning an upgrade, and then you can use that as part of your long-term plan with it. Jaylee, about to reinstall my UV stabilizer. Nice. John Reefer, Vermont. My mixing station is 65 gallons. I have configured it to mix 50 gallons at a time. I use New Marine. Don't even worry about trace elements not being mixed exactly through the bucket. If you are worried, I mean, you could just roll your bucket or your box around and just remix it. In theory, if there's different particle sizes during shipping and moving around, stuff could potentially settle down. I've honestly haven't really worried about it, but you could just give your bag or bucket or whatever a bit of a shake and mix up, and it should just remix everything. Any quick tips to plumb a frag tank to my 180G with a manifold? So take your manifold, put it to the return tank on the frag tank, pick your frag tank drains, and pop it to the sump on the other one. Super easy. The one nice thing about plumbing tanks together is you have one set of dosing pumps, you have one skimmer, like it just reduces your overall costs, and there's stability between the tanks. So you can move stuff from one tank to the other tank, and you're pretty much issue free there. So it's kind of a nice benefit of it. Currently have a yellow tank in my 3-foot, just over 3 inches big. You kind of got to use a judgment call, right? If he looks like he's getting too big for the tank, then, you know, maybe you go buy a small one and trade him in or something, right? Or get a bigger tank, which is always a bonus. Brett, how do I have a bangin' reef with as little maintenance as possible? Hashtag lazy reefer. So on that one, one, I guess, if you want to have a super easy tank, like just like a softy tank or a Zoa tank, like they're pretty darn low maintenance. You have big swings, they're probably not really going to care. If you're going for, you know, more of a mixed reef acro tank, then you probably want to add in a bunch of automation. So if you want to be lazy to tank, I mean, I'm a big fan now of automating water changes because it's nice not having to do it. But at the end of the day, I mean, stick to a really easy tank. Like, if you like a wicked Zoa tank or a wicked rockflower tank, like the water's a little bit dirtier, they don't really care. They'll be happy. Super duper easy, low maintenance. And if you are a tech junkie like me and you like automation, I mean, go for acros or mixed reef and, you know, automate the heck out of it. And that's another way to be lazy. Like I love the building stuff, automating aspect of it. I think that part's a lot of fun. Do you have a flow schedule for your power heads or just random? I run MP40 with 1 hour nutrient. I used to swap between the modes all the time. And the last year or so, I've literally just left on Reef Crest. So the frag tank beside me had the MP40s on the back wall. The tank is about 6.5 or 7 and a bit feet. And it's 28 front to back. So they're all on the back of the tank blowing forward. I have 4 of them on there. So I have one every like 2 1.5 2 feet or so, and they're all circling this way back to front. And then on the water tank, or the water box, I have the 2MP60s on the overflow wall, and they're 70 to 75% on reef crest, so they just ramp up and down throughout the day. Sharbuckles Reef, are you the only dude? Shouldn't it be Reef Dude? So many questions. Yeah, there's a good story with that. One day I'm gonna make a very entertaining video about it, about the ReefDudes part of it. But yes, it is ReefDudes with an S. One of these days. I had a very funny video I had in mind about that, but I just haven't had the free time to do it yet. One of these days I will. Ricky Reefer, I met some guy the other day who is only 1 year in at LFS, told him to run a separate system, so now he has 7 all separate systems. Holy smokes, a lot of tanks. That's one thing with this hobby, is you can get down that rabbit hole of more tanks, more tanks, more tanks, more tanks. And even in, like, before I was even saltwater, in the freshwater days, I had freshwater planted tanks, and I had, you know, I was breeding all like the crystal shrimps and the orange eye blue tigers, all those little fancy shrimps and stuff. And I had like 6 or 7 tanks with each one a different species of shrimps, and I was like getting crazy. And now I've agreed to, with the wife, to keep 2 tanks only. No size restrictions, but quantity restrictions. So I got the frag tank in my office in the water box now. Now it's fun to have many tanks, but it's also a lot of work to maintain them. So you got to find that happy balance. Vermont. Wonder if it's multiple personalities. It could be. You never know. But yeah, the biggest thing with so many tanks is just it's a lot of work to maintain them all, and it takes that dedication to do it. Been waiting on the ReefDudes story for a long time now. I know. One of these days, I just need like, I work too much. I just need some time off to actually like do a bunch of these ideas in my head. I've even debated starting a second YouTube channel about random stuff, and I've been asking myself, do I have the time to do 2, right? It probably wouldn't be like weekly like this one is, but I may do a more lax one about random stuff. So still debating that. It could happen. We'll see. Devin, which RAS do you recommend for flatworm management in a bare bottom system? Yellow. Okay, Springer damsels work well. They can work well. Yellow chorus RAS is always a fave for me. Yellow chorus, they're great pest hunters. Millionaires are good when they're small, not as good when they get big because they get huge. But I would say yellow chorus is probably one of your best bet. And Springer damsels are known to go after flatworms. Cue ball reef, should I run a separate pump for a manifold? It depends what you're running off of your manifold. It is nice to have. Okay, 2 considerations. If you run a separate pump, then you don't have to worry about your reactors clogging and changing the flow through your tank. Now, the only reason you'd care about that is because if the flow of your tank goes up or down or changes, then it's going to change your overflows, and then they potentially could get louder, or they won't be silent, so they'll be tweaking your gate valve on your main drain a little more often. It's the only thing to consider if you run off one, but it's nice and simple to have one pump, right? It's probably less energy in theory, could be less power, could be one thing to maintain, but having it separated means your drains will be more consistent. So that's the only really consideration I'd throw out there. And if you want to do something funky like what I did on my previous tank, where I had an auto feeder in my sump, so it would feed right in front of the return pump would suck those pellets, shoot them onto the tank. Like, I wouldn't want to do that if I had the manifold, because then I'm shooting food pellets into my reactors and it'll clog them up earlier. So it's just a few little things like that. Queen City Reefs and more. I have to agree, bring the tank count down due to the wives. Yep. 2 tanks is a happy amount, right? It's not too much work, but still gives you lots to play with. You got that fixed, so you can work on the other tank if you want to. And I try and mess with my frag tank more so that I keep my hands out of the other tank a little bit more. Scott Morrison, hi from Scotland. Hello from Canada. So I've really been trying to not have my hands in the water box every day, you know, try and do it a couple times a week and not constantly. Yep. Ouija, I'd be up for watching a second channel. I haven't fully decided. Like, if I do a second channel, like I have a lot of hobbies, which is the problem. Like, do I keep it just like a general vlog style and just throw in whatever? Do I do techie stuff? Do I do, you know, like I play airsoft on the side? Do I do that? You know, electric skateboard one wheels like my other big hobby now. Like, I don't know. So I'm just, do I pick a niche or do I just do general random life, other stuff that interests me that is not saltwater? We'll see. ML, what is going on? Angry Owl Aquariums, how is the scrubber doing? Sorry if I missed story. Scrubber is still working awesome. I got about a 0.1 pH boost from it. I was up in the attic. It is still going strong. I have not used up all my media yet, which is a good sign. I'm gonna have to look when I publish that video, when I rechange it, just to figure out how long the media lasts. But yeah, it's still going strong. And when I was up there pulling down the Christmas tree, it only used maybe like 20% of it maybe. And that was maybe a month ago now, so maybe I'll go up later and see where it's at now, but it's still up there pretty good. Marcus Reef Yellow Chorus Rafts looks awesome and leaves fish alone, but they will kill your inverts. I don't really find them to be an issue with snails and stuff. I find the Melanaris worse. I find he'll attack any of my snails that get knocked over. He'll just be hunting around it and looking at trying to get it. Is Lockline what's used, Wolfgang, is Lockline what's used most custom for return nozzles? Yes, they are. It just match whatever size your return pump is. So on mine, I generally go with 3/4 inch for whatever reason. In retrospect, I probably should 1 inch because then I would get more flow out of the Versa or the Vectra. But tell us about the CO2 scrubber. Okay, so definitely did a video on it. So check that one out if you want to see like proper full details. But CO2 scrubber basically uses what's called soda lime, and the soda lime is what they use in something like a rebreather, or more frequently in anesthesia machines in hospitals. And it's made to absorb CO2 so that if they pump in whatever gases they're using to knock you out and keep you going as they're operating on you, they're not wasting extra gases or whatever. Anesthesia, I don't know what the word is, but they're not using extra stuff, right? So it's rebreathing, recycling your air, and then there's a canister of soda lime pellets which scrubs the CO2 out so they can keep reusing that air, and it keeps all that medicine in the air. So that's the main purpose of it. So these pellets, it's basically like Kalkwasser, like what we drip to our tank, but in pelletized form, and it absorbs the CO2. So you are injecting air through your skimmer. Your skimmer is basically like an interface with the water, and you're using very low CO2 air, right? So which by injecting less CO2 into your tank, higher oxygen content, you're therefore raising the pH of your water by having less CO2 in the water. And that's kind of how it works to do it. So most people hook it up to their skimmer, let it draw air through it. The most efficient way is, for the most part, been proven to be do a recirculating method. So I've been actually contemplating if I do a hybrid one with mine, because right now it is in my attic, so it's pulling fresh air. Now fresh air through it will last longer because outside air has around 400 ppm of CO2. If I run this guy in the house, I believe it's on average, I'm going to say it's more like 700 or 800, so it's double the CO2 content. So if I had that CO2 scrubber inside my house, it would only last half the time. Now, if you do a recirculating method, you're sucking air from your skimmer and running it through it over and over and over again. So you're using a lower concentration CO2 source air, and which can make it last a little bit longer. Yeah, so Angry Aquariums, impressed. I was a bit skeptical. I will go up there. I'll probably take the Christmas tree down in the next few days, and I'll go up there and take a look and see how it's doing. Maybe I'll post it to the YouTube story. On average, how many fish in a 180 gallon fully stocked? You can't really say quantity of fish because it depends on what type of fish, right? 5 tangs could equal like 20 little fish. So at the end of the day, the biggest things, if you're using tangs and bigger fish, make sure they have the proper swimming space. If you are doing, your aquascape can play a big thing. I find a lot of aggression is over territory in a tank. So make sure you have lots of little caves and crannies. So you don't want to have a ton of fish with not a lot of hiding spots, because they're going to be constantly fighting over territory. We have tons of holes. Everyone has their little crack and hole to go into. There's going to be a lot less aggression. And also, if you feed your tank well, then you have less aggression as well. If fish are hungry, they're going to be more aggressive than if they're nice, full, happy, and palm tree. I'd be down to watch an airsoft blog channel. All right, so could be that. I have a electric skateboard thing, which has been like my happy social distancing, keep sanity activity lately. So I go for little cruises on that once in a while. So I'm doing that, and I don't know, snowboarding, who knows? So it may just be a random, maybe tech reviews, maybe all the IT stuff I do, who knows? So I haven't decided if I should mix everything into one or do something more niche based, like, this one's a reef channel, right? Do I do something else that's niche or just general? I don't know, we'll see. So that might happen. I've been contemplating it for a while, I just haven't actually done it yet. Angry L, did you notice increased alkalinity conception with the pH? If you have a higher pH, it will grow coral quicker, so they will consume more alkalinity. I'm going to say yes. I don't know how to quantify how much, but I am fairly certain I did increase my calcium reactor effluent after I got my pH higher. Now, that being said, I did lower it now, but I'm also dosing other stuff that raises my alkalinity as well, so it's to try and keep my alkalinity stable. ReefDudes OnlyFans one. Yeah, so we'll see. So I don't know. I have many hobbies. Not enough time. Too many hobbies, but it's fun. Great book and full of useful info. Thanks, Ricky Reefer. All right, okay. Robert was asking, what corals do not mix with others? Does Singularia, I'm not saying that properly, but Singularia, chemical warfare increase and constantly asking for a friend. Okay. Leather corals will release toxin for kind of their form of coral warfare, and it may not like kill the coral beside it, but it will likely help stunt its growth. And that's one of a big argument for running carbon once in a while, was to suck out any of those potential toxins. I know a lot of leather corals will. So like I have a green singulator in my frag tank. I got a bunch of mushrooms. I don't know if mushrooms do it. The green Japanese toadstool, like that guy probably does. So a lot of those type of corals will. Mark getting shot with an airsoft gun while riding an electric skateboard. I haven't tried that yet. I haven't been off road with it yet. We'll see. It's still kind of winterish. By spring, we'll see. I'll get braver and do some trail riding. Once they're not all mud and the snow's gone and it's nice and dry, I'll actually take it and try and do off-roading. It'll be fun. Maybe I'll take the GoPro next ride and do a little video for fun with it. I'm still learning though. I'm new. But yeah, that could be intense. So yeah, in general, I say it's worth running carbon, even once a month or so. Just run some, get out any of those toxins. If there's any nasties in your tank, get rid of those. Another newer rabbit hole that I'm going to start going down through is, if you guys saw my Instagram posts from last week, I got a microscope now, which is sweet because I've wanted one for ages. And I got one that has the trinocular port on the top, which means I can put my camera on it and get some pictures and videos and stuff in there. So that's going to be a really cool one. And I'm still learning it. Like, I'm getting the basics of it, but I'm terrible at IDing stuff. So eventually I'm going to figure out which works with it, but it's gonna be kind of a cool way to look at the micro life of the tank and stuff. Elder 1945, welcome Kyle. So I think that's gonna be a really cool one that could do stuff. And like, one of the things I thought my tank was dino, turns out it is actually, I'm blanking on the name, like it's kind of like a golden brown algae, it's called. So, in which I learned can be caused by silicates. So now I threw some Purit and some GFO in my frag tank because I know those can help suck out silicates, right? So there's all kinds of cool stuff you can learn by figuring out what stuff is, or figuring out what's in your water. And it really is amazing how much life can be in a single drop of water. It's crazy. ML, what is the risk of running carbon full time? Okay, so I don't know if this is 100% true, but one of the big theories is too much carbon can cause HLLE, which is head and lateral Lyme disease. Usually you'll see it on some tangs if some of their face looks all like a little bit corroded, or if there's like, you can see like a big line in them and stuff. I think that should be HLLE, and potentially from stripping out certain nutrients out of the water, something related to that. So that's one of the big things. If I can't say 100% sure if that's true or not. It's quite plausible. The biggest thing I find is it's a lot of the dust and the fines in carbon. So you want to make sure you rinse your carbon really well. So generally what I do is I'll run my reactor just through tap water or in the bathtub, whatever. Just use something to run, or shower nozzle, whatever, something to run through it and rinse it until it is crystal clear. Get rid of all those fines before you add on your tank, and that helps quite a bit. How are you liking the Pureit? This is the first time I've used Pureit, so it definitely needs a lot of rinsing. So that's one thing to note, is that you got to rinse it quite a bit. So I just use some cold tap water and rinse it really well first. But I've heard it can pull all kinds of random nasty things out of your tank, and silicate supposedly is one of the things that causes that algae type substance that I have, like sastrophytes. I don't know, I forget the name. But so that's one of the main reasons I threw it on the tank. No tanks here anyways. Nano, yeah, on a nano tank, on my nanos, I always use Chemi Pure Blue because it was carbon and had some kind of a phosphate resin in it as well. So it helped keep your phosphates low and get the water nice and clear, and I think it's a good way to do it. You are most welcome. What is the difference between Pureit and regular carbon? Good question. Pureit has some, I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe it has some types of other kind of resin stuff mixed in to help absorb other stuff out of the water. So it's like carbon plus some. I don't fully know. I don't know. Maybe I'll throw it into the microscope and see. It actually might be interesting now that I think of it. But it does have some other stuff in it to pull other nasties out of the water. So I don't know. This is the first time I've used it as of this week. But I know lots of people that had weird, funky things going on in their tasks, and they ran that and sucked it out and helped turn their tank around. So definitely heard good things about it. What website do I go to get saltwater fish? I am building a tank. It really depends where you live. Generally, I would try and find a local fish store if you could. I like to check out fish in person when I buy them, make sure they look healthy, you know, make sure they're eating, make sure they're, you know, they're swimming normally, like just make sure they look healthy in the beginning. You know, ideally find a LFS that quarantines them if you're not going to do it, and just give them kind of the best chance that way. Scott, I always found when running carbon, a lot of the time it would strip iodine from the water. You are probably true. It can strip many things from the water. Iodine is something that I did have on a doser too, and that is one. Iodine can also be depleted very quickly. So it's something you don't want to dose too much of it, but a little bit can help, you know, certain corals. I run carbon full time. My Red Sea Nano, no issues. Do it for 3 years. Red Sea carbon. There you go. Yeah, in nano tanks, I always ran it pretty much 24/7 actually. I think just larger tanks with tanks and stuff, I've not ran it 24/7. It's true. Bobby said, which LFS do you use? Where are you, Ian? It really depends where you are. If you're in British Columbia and local, then I shall tell you. But for the most part, none of them ship, so it wouldn't be overly useful for you. Should I turn off my skimmer when dosing or adding media into the reactors? I don't. I will turn off my skimmer during feed mode, and then it waits 20-30 minutes to turn back on afterwards. When dosing, I don't bother. I would... Olympia. Where's Olympia? There's a place called Olympia. It was a good Greek restaurant here. Okay, so generally if you're worried about it, just dose after your skimmer, right? So it's gonna flow past, go through your whole tank, then eventually by the time it hits it, it's so diluted it's not even an issue. My 525 XL. Hey Devin, I have a leather finger curl on my Red Sea 525 XL that is about 23 by 16 by 15. Whoa, that is huge. 3 years old. I need to start fragging it. How much is too much to frag regarding toxin release? That is a huge leather. So when you cut them, they will release some toxin and they will slime up, and that will release some nasties into your tank. So if you're fragging in your tank, I would definitely run carbon. Now, the other way to avoid it is take it out of your tank if you can, frag it in a different container, rinse it off well, then put it back, and you'll have less of those toxins, everything else going around. Olympia, Washington. Yeah, so I'm in British Columbia, just above you in Canada. So my LFSs are definitely about 5-hour drive for you. Rookie Reefer. How many LFSs do I have locally within an hour drive? I have, like, not counting big chain ones, 2. And then another home-based business one, so 3, I guess, for the local ones. And anything else is much further. Yeah, so yeah, not a ton, but I got a couple of pretty good ones now. And actually, the couple that I have, a buddy bought a local one, and he's been like really stepping it up and making the store nice, which is awesome. Another one that's about 45 minutes away, same thing. He's redoing it all and stepping up all the salt water. And another guy that's super close to me, and he's literally like a few blocks away. Maybe like I rode the electric skateboard there and traded him coral and came back. Like close enough. So there's a couple not too far away. So it's not too bad. And I like just trading coral now for stuff. I was like, oh, I want those coral. I'll trade you some. So that part's kind of fun. I'm at the point now where it's like, when you first start the hobby, like you spend a small fortune on coral and everything, and then you get to the point where you have tons of coral, and then you can just trade with people, and that's like the best place to be, or in my opinion, because it is an expensive hobby, right? Like you can do certain things cheap, but it definitely can be expensive, and so I'm a huge fan of just trading stuff. So if anyone's local and wants to trade some coral, let me know. But I always just like just trading for stuff I don't have. That's cool. Palm tree. What is the best coral dip for getting pests off? I like to get a new coral, want to dip it before adding it. There is many coral dips out there. Best is a very hard to quantify question. Some dips work better for certain pests, and I have a whole slew of stuff. One that I've been using lately that I like actually is Reef Primer by Polyp Lab. It's potassium salts, and I don't know, I feel like it's very gentle on the corals. Like I feel like it doesn't stress them out as much, and it seems to get a lot of stuff off. So far that's been working well. Now I also have Revive. I have Coral RX. What else do I have? And the Bear, like the insecticide stuff. So there's definitely lots. Now in the past I had to deal with those nasty acridine flatworms at one point, which is a huge pain in the butt. And every single week I dipped everything that was in that tank with a different dip. So I literally had like, 6 weeks, and I just rotated through like those 4 dips. And that's why I have so many dips, because I tried a different one each week just in case, one worked better than something else did. So basically just pick one. They all work, but some work better than others on certain things. Now with coral, a big one too is a lot of pests will hide inside of the base of a coral. So if you're buying an acro, it's wise to cut off the base. Now most people don't want to lose that lovely encrusted base because you feel like you're robbing yourself of coral, but you would vastly reduce your chances of bringing stuff in. Ideally, chop it off the plug. That's, cutting out the plugs half the battle. And then, but if you actually cut the base, you drastically reduce your chance of something coming in that way. So it is something to consider. Copper bands and amphipod, do you seed your tank? If you have fish that are pod hunters, it is valuable to seed your tank. When I started my tanks, I did seed it with a bunch of the apex pods and the tiger pods from Reef Nutrition. I have not seeded with amphipods, but they somehow found their way in there. I do have a tiny copper band in my frag tank I recently added. I'm hoping he will eat my Aptasia. We'll find out. But yeah, in general, like pods will find a way in your tank. However, if you have, a mandarin, something that relies on pods, then I would definitely supplement them. And if you don't, it doesn't hurt to add them. They will reproduce on their own. If you do something like phytoplankton, it will help feed the pods and they will reproduce a little bit quicker. Just start dosing Red Sea trace colors. Any experience with it? Yes, don't overdose it. So ideally with trace elements, you should only be testing them or dosing them if you are testing them. I used the Red Sea trace elements for a couple years. They did work well. However, I also did have issues overdosing them, and certain colors were taking over. I know I've told this story a few times, but like the Rainbow Monty, which goes like the reds to the yellows, the greens, like that was all completely red from dosing whatever part was the red. So overdosing it can definitely make certain colors take over. And in my tank, like behind me in the water box, like I had some corals that were like, borderline yellowy, now they're greeny, which is because I dosed too much iron. So I dialed all my dosing back on that because I could see the color changing. So certain trace elements can definitely affect the colors, some too much if you dose too much of it. So that's a consideration. Scott, are you running your Fuge 24/7? Do not let the Fuge rest. I used to let it rest, actually. and run at halftime opposite to that. Since I've been on my hardcore raise my pH, I have been running it 24/7, and so far the Chaeto's been growing like gangbusters. I didn't see any reason not to stop doing it. It's been growing like crazy, especially with dosing a bit of iron. And I have the clear water scrubber on the frag tank, and that was probably due to be cleaned by now because I haven't cleaned it yet, but that one definitely has been on 24/7 as well. Have I ever done microbubbling? I sure have. I did that for quite a while, actually. Biggest things with microbubbling, I did it at nighttime when the lights were off. If you are going to do it, I have actually done a few videos on it, so check those out. But wooden airstone away from your return pump so it doesn't get the big bubbles, but it sucks in the tiny bubbles, go in your tank. I found it the biggest thing, if you're using outside air, it will definitely help with the pH. If you're not, I find it also does help with water clarity because it will help capture any of those little microparticles in your tank and carry it to your filtration. But it's really easy to do. Definitely had a couple of videos on it, so check those out if you want to hear about it. Petin. So I'm buying a seahorse. Is there anything I need to know about what kind of fish can go with it? I would make sure they are peaceful fish. Seahorses are very slow moving, docile creatures. You don't want any fish that would be aggressive. You know, maybe like a cool little like banded pipefish might be cool in there. Maybe a mandarin. But just do stuff that would be peaceful fish. Like make sure they're peaceful, nothing aggressive. So aside from that, I mean, I've never kept a seahorse. I think it would be cool. One day I may do it. I've been wanting to try it. If I do it, I kind of want to try door seahorses, but they're a bit trickier to find in Canada for whatever reason. But I think they'd be pretty cool. The biggest thing with them, bigger ones, they tend to have to be fed a couple times a day. So it is a bit of a commitment issue. So make sure you have mysis or something you can feed them a little more frequently. That's basically the biggest thing with them. Bigger ones are easier because you can feed them mysis. The dwarfs, I know you might need to hatch baby brine shrimp and stuff like that more frequently. But they're definitely super cool little creatures. Alright, I probably missed some questions, so if there's anything else you guys want me to do, let me know. Probably give it about 10 more minutes, and then I got some family stuff and a bunch of other dinner and a bunch of other things I gotta get rolling. So anything I missed, feel free to ask it again, and we will hit it up. Okay, perfect. What else we got up here? So yeah, no, I have not found any negative effect from running the Fuse 24/7. So, Koa, what is your experience on Triton method? Started using it a month ago, but my tanks are not doing well. Good day from Australia, good day. So, I have not done Triton method personally. There is the method with refugium and without refugium. Basically, do they have the extra elements like iron and molybdenum and all that stuff in it, or don't they? So that's one thing. I mean, it works. It basically relies. It's actually so you're just asking. Yes, it is margarita. What's a good test kit for magnesium? I have been using the Red Sea Mag for a while now. Ever sold a tank you regret selling? I really like my Red Sea Nano, the 20 gallon. Like, that was a sweet tank. It makes me a bit sad to have taken that one down. So Angry Owl, when are you starting Moonshine? Okay, so honestly, Moonshine and Triton are similar. They both rely on you dosing all the main stuff, and then doing regular ICP tests, and then correcting based on those ICP tests. They both have the same core concept. Now, Triton has a bunch of the stuff more mixed into the 4 dosing parts, where Moonshiner splits it out differently, and you're dosing all those specifically. Now, the one benefit of that method is you are dosing exactly how much you calculate you need of every single trace element. It's much more involved, you need a lot more stuff, but it does kind of keep you a little more tuned in your tank because you're dosing all these things on a regular basis. You know, you're doing regular ICP tests. Now, the only downfall is because you're dosing so many things, you do need to test for it. And, you know, you do need to keep up and do those ICP tests to make sure everything's in check and make sure your dosing isn't swaying too much. So you can definitely get awesome results for it, but it's definitely more of a commitment to do it. I think I am potentially going to try doing my little hybrid method where I dose some of the blended main trace elements like on a regular basis, then I might tweak with individual elements based off, you know, some ICP testing every few months. So we'll see. So I'm still debating this all, but that's kind of my loose plan of it, so we'll see. Chili Willy Reef. Chili Willy. How long should I dose vinegar to lower nitrates? Carbon dosing, you want to go slow. There is stuff which is conveniently on my desk like Milpox, because I was actually going to try to lower a bit of my nitrates in the frag tank. It's based like Milpox is really like sugar, vinegar, vodka, or ethanol, whatever. Something. It's basically a blend of carbon dosing. Now with carbon dosing, you want to start slow, build it up, and how much you dose really depends on what your nutrients are at. You don't want to overdose it. Just go slow. I have in the past, when dosing too much carbon dosing, I noticed like a yellow tang I had, he started getting little bits of like this orange blotchiness to him. So I stopped carbon dosing and went away. So carbon dosing is essentially feeding bacteria. You're feeding the bacteria the carbon source, and the bacteria are the one that are actually doing the work in your tank. So you're just building the army of bacteria by feeding them a carbon source. But if you are doing that method, just go slow. See, 100% rookie if you're technically dosing for bacteria, 100%. And actually had a really good live stream with Lou talking about that as well. So if you want to look at some of the Tropic Marine ones I did with Lou, some really good ones to talk about carbon dosing. Remarkable Reese 499 super chat. Thank you. What are your thoughts on the width of the water box peninsula? Debating that or a custom one. Would like to go a little wider. So the one that I have is 6 feet long, 25 wide, 24 tall. I do really like the dimensions of it. If you were going to do a custom tank, you know, if you're going like 30, 36 inches of width, I think that'd be really, really awesome as well. So it really depends on what fits your space, to be honest. Now, I get asked actually quite a bit on the difference, you know, custom tank versus pre-manufactured tank, and, you know, custom tank glass wise versus, you know, the Red Sea, the water box, you can get polished edges. They can look very pristine. Right? Like with the water box, like one thing that impressed me is like even the weir, everything's all glass. Like it's all like, I don't know if it's lasers, CNC, whatever they water jetted out, but it's really pristine in there, right? It's not acrylic. You're not going to worry about scratching it and all that other stuff, which is cool. But when you buy like, you know, the Red Sea or the water box, something, one thing that you do get is you get that nice pristine furniture with it. And that's a good chunk of it. Is how, like, you know, like that, like on mine, I got the white cabinet with it, but the cabinet's flush with the tank, you know, it just looks all pristine and finished. Where you do a custom one, you know, you're likely do like something, a steel stand, you got to face it yourself, and I find that's a big chunk of the difference in it. That's what I'm doing currently. Raising potassium, yep, definitely a good one. I dosed a bunch of the Walgo after doing an ICP test, realizing it was low. Scott, my mate ran a calcium reactor and I ran Triton, and when our ICP test came back, we always had to add more elements than my mate. 2 tanks are almost the same. Yeah, with the calcium reactor, like there is certain things. Like I did that test myself where I went for a couple months of not dosing anything but the calcium reactor, and then I did an ICP test to see what I wasn't getting, and there's like strontium and a bunch of other ones that I was missing that I had to supplement on top of the calcium reactor. Remarkable Reese. Devin knows a water box. Yes, he does. Debating between water box or Red Sea. I have owned a Red Sea Nano, and I did own the water box. They were both very, very nice tanks. A couple things with the water box that stood out to me over the Red Sea. I don't know what the stand was made of with the Red Sea, but I know the water box is actually like plywood, which I thought was nice. It's actual like proper plywood, so it's tougher, and like when you put all the hinges and you can see all the layers of it through there, so that some of the hinges and stuff, I don't know, it just seemed a bit softer closing and stuff like that, like little things, right? Both of them, glass was both nice on both of them. The water box, like the overflow was all glass. That stuff I thought was a little more polished and nice, and some of the stand just felt a little more solid, but honestly they're both nice tanks, but I've been happy with both of them. When you feed your Carl, do you target feed or broadcast feed? How many times a week? I broadcast my tank every single day. The main staple that I feed my tank is mysis, so I use PE mysis, and usually I just break off a chunk, probably about that big, that I throw in the big tank, and then I slap it on the side of the MP60 and just let it start firing food around the tank. You know, the frag tank, I give a chunk about that big, and then that's my daily staple. Randomly, I'm gonna say maybe once a week. On a slow week, twice a week on a busier week, I'll take something else like Canalus or the Reef, like a bunch of the reef nutrition feeds, like the oyster feast or the oyster eggs or catalyst or different ones, and I'll broadcast feed those as well. Or sometimes I'm really motivated, I'll just spot feed with like something like reef roids. So it really depends. And I got some of the Brightwell feeds like the reef blizzard, and they're like dried zooplankton and different ones. So I mix it up a lot. So mice is my staple, and then as for the supplemental coral feeds, once in a while I spot feed. 90% of the time I just broadcast feed the whole tank, and I leave my return pump off for about 45 minutes, let the power heads keep running as is, so it just keeps circulating, blowing stuff all over the tank, and it gives those polyps time to capture stuff out of the tank. Cody Bean, what's your favorite acro in your tank currently? That is a hard question. Very, very hard. I really like my ice cube. I really like the Palmer's Blue. It is not in its full glory that it used to be in my old tank. I did lose some of it. It is coming back in the current tank, so it's growing, but it's like this tiny little piece where I had like a nice big piece in my prior tank. Orange Passion's a nice one. I do like the Orange Passion. I don't know. There's so many nice corals. It's hard to say. I got another one from a buddy a while ago, which is called Vivid Confetti. And it's not like fully super colorful yet, but it's getting there. It gets all these crazy colors on it. But Orange Passion, I'm gonna say, is one up there that I like. Just because it gets blue with orange polyps, which is really cool. My favorite corals in general, I'm gonna say millipore, just because I love those big shaggy polyps. So, yeah, I don't know. I can't discriminate. I like all corals. As long as it's colorful, I like it. Easy to please. All right, guys, we are at 5:30. This is an hour and a half of me randomly solo chatting, so I think I'm going to call her today. Yeah, my Orange Passion grows super slow too, but it's pretty. I got this little chunk of Walt Disney, but it's not very pretty. It's just like this mound of green, and hopefully eventually we'll get nice and colorful. What is your dream fish to have? I don't know. One fish I like that I wouldn't buy. Well, if it was cheap, I would, but they're like overly priced, I wouldn't. Leonardi Rhasis. They're bright yellow and blue, which are really cool, but they're like $1,000, which I could not bring myself to spend on a fish. Like $100 maybe, $1,000 no. So if I had one of those for a reasonable price, I would consider buying it, like less than $150, but I don't know. It's so hard to do. All expensive acros grow slow. Well, it's expensive because it grows slow, right? If it grew like a weed, it would be cheap. Peppermint angels are pretty as well. What's your favorite reef light and why? I'm a big fan of Radions. They're not cheap, but they're awesome. Originally, in my original tank, I had like D-Sunnies and DIY LEDs. I've had so many lights back in the day, and then I had all these friends that had Radions, and then kind of wanted them, and one day I decided to go buy them, and it was like $1,200 that I dropped for this on a 30-gallon tank. It was like over $1,000. It's like I thought it was crazy spending this at the time. And now you're like, oh yeah, reef stuff. But this is like an early reefer, right? This is after like 3 or 4 lights of upgrading. And then I got like the lights, the arms, the mount, the reef link, and all this stuff. And it was like crazy expensive. But I had all these friends that had them, and their tanks were all amazing. And I was tired of my cheap China lights. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna buy a nice light. And then I've been hooked ever since. Like, it just give you just the colors and everything on it. So that's the main thing. Like some of the Kessel stuff, I know that also has a big following. I am definitely more on the geeky control freak side, and I've always felt robbed that I couldn't pick my color channels, right? It's like blue or white. I'm like, but what about the rest? You know, and some people only care about blue, and that's perfect for them, right? I like the option of having all the colors, mainly because the colors you see are what are reflected back at you. So having more colors available to tweak will help you enhance different colors in your tank. We'll dig into this one in a future one. You get used to throwing money down the drain. Yeah, that's another good thing. If you are good at growing coral and you have lots of coral, you can trade coral. Like I have gotten a lot of my gear from trading stuff to an LFS for credit, and then I use the credit to splurge on some of my fancy toys, right? Like there's a lot of stuff I wouldn't have bought if I didn't do it partially through credit, right? Because it gets expensive. Like, and I am a tech junkie. I obviously have a ton of gear. And being a YouTuber, I have even more gear because sometimes I get to beta test it for people, which is awesome. Or, you know, like I'll purposely like I have 3 different aquarium controllers because it gives me more stuff to learn it so that I can help teach you guys about it, right? If I was a normal sane reefer, I'd have one type and then I could swap stuff between tanks. But because I like to teach stuff and do stuff, then I will try a lot of different stuff just so it makes me more knowledgeable to share it. So that's crazy. Your willingness to spend sane money on stuff gets numb the longer you reef. It's true. But yeah, pro tip though, like if you are good at growing coral, you know, and your LFS likes to sell it, which most of them do, because local stuff is going to be hardier. It's already going to be accustomed. They don't have to worry about losses in shipping. You know, you can trade stuff to your LFS. Like I've cultured pods and Fido, all kinds of stuff I trade, and I'd use that to buy new gear. And it's just a good way to do it, which makes it more affordable. So food for thought. All right, guys, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. If you did, hit that like button. I need to give a shout out for the super chats tonight. I thank you guys. I do appreciate it. What do we got here? We got Remarkable Reefs, Pappy Reef, Malcolm's Reef, Reefing with O, John Reefer Vermont. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. One day, hopefully YouTube will be like the full-time job, but for now it's the hobby job that I spend way too much time on, but I love it. So labor of love. All right, guys, hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that thumbs up button, and I will catch you guys on next week's live stream.